Why don't you
Good-
call the meeting to order?
I will. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock and we've been getting ourselves organized in real time. I'm calling the Amherst Finance Committee meeting of March 3rd to order at 1:03. And I see we have a quorum of the members present, although one counselor has told me she will not be able to join us, and I don't see any resident members. But my first order of business is to make sure that everyone can hear and be heard, since we are conducting this meeting remotely. So I will call on you as I see you on the screen. Anna.
Present.
Kathy is present. Lynn.
Present.
And Sam.
Present.
And Tom Porter has just joined us. Tom, can you let us know? Terrific.
I hear you.
That's great. So seeing that we have a quorum, the first item on the agenda, before I have Lynn pull up the longer agenda, is public comments. So I want to make sure I don't forget that. And we have attendees. So we are open for public comments if anyone wishes to make comments at this point.
And I can bring them in, Kathy.
You're co-host on this?
Hmm.
Okay, so one hand is raised out of the 5 people in attendance. Please bring the one person in. Did you do it?
I thought so.
And if you didn't, I'm good at doing this. I'll just do it.
No, I just did.
Okay, so
Okay.
Maria, we think you have joined us. So if you unmute.
Thank you. Maria Kopicki, South Amherst. I just wanted to say that I am very happy that you guys finally have on the agenda a discussion of the finances of the library building project. I am kind of disappointed that there is nothing in the packet to be able to review before your discussion today. This is a long time coming, and I think it's really important that the Finance Committee find out what's happening with all of the borrowing. What are the terms? What's going on there? What's the cash flow analysis? What's going on with the contingency? There's a lot of unanswered questions, financial questions that I think that you guys need to address. Finally, I don't want to take too much time so you can get to it, but I do want to remind you all, some of you were on the council at the time, some of you weren't. There was a petition a couple of years ago done very casually over just a couple of months, and over 1,000 people in town signed this petition expressing deep concern about the costs and the financial implications of the library building project. And a third of those people that signed were people who had supported the project but no longer did. We're no longer talking about supporting a project or not supporting a project. This is now about knowing the financial impacts that this project is having on the town. So I am grateful that you are going to be addressing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. So one thing I just want to, Lynn, can you pull up the agenda for today now?
Yes, I can. I'm trying to.
Okay, I think I just found it, so I can pull it up also. Would you like me? I'll just open it.
I'm trying to remove. How do I? Maria.
I think you just want to move her to the audience. Just make sure you don't remove her from the meeting.
I don't see it.
I changed her back to an attendee.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All I could see was removing her from the meeting, and I didn't want to click that. Okay, I will be glad to pull up the agenda. And I'm ready to do so.
Okay, please pull up the agenda. Hi, and I see Sam has his hand raised, and go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm, is the public comment part of the agenda over?
Oh, yeah, I should say, I'm sorry.
Or are there other people who want to speak?
I will close the cup. Thank you very much, Sam. There are no other hands up, so we're closing the public comment period.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you for doing that. So what I just wanted to point out in looking through this agenda, and it may have been not listed correctly, it was the potential agenda for the March 17th meeting is the discussion of Jones Library. So I didn't do the correct indent the way, that is not on today's agenda. So I just, and I'll address some questions that I have put together, but this was, I formatted it in a way it was supposed to be on the agenda for March 17th. So I apologize to everyone if people thought it was on the agenda for today. So today's agenda is I sent everyone a draft report on our discussion last meeting on the financial orders, because we have time for everyone to read it if they have any comments. And I have some updated information from Shannon Bernacci on the extent to which the region has any stabilization funds. And so I will report on that. We have the fourth item this is after public comment. Under the charter provision 28C, and actually it's A, B, C, D, the council has the authority to request information, and it's delegated that authority to any committee to the extent the committee is asking for information relevant to what it will be deliberating on. And so we can, under that authority, and I double checked with the council president, we can ask questions of the school superintendent, the library director, and the town manager. And those would all be related to financial impact kinds of questions. And so if anyone has any to suggest today, and I have several, I've planned a discussion of that. I also want to review the budget calendar, and I sent a revised calendar, and Lynn was not sure it made it into the calendar, but it was in the packet, I think, for last meeting, and we didn't get to it. It was proposing specific dates in May that we would be meeting and potentially what we would be meeting on. And I noticed that in November, we only had one meeting scheduled, and we need two if we're going to get the guidelines done. So I wanted to just go over that. And if we have time, and this was on the last agenda, Anna, and we ran out of time last time, it was to talk about whether potential fall meetings with departments. If we don't have time today, we'll move it to the next agenda. But all of that was supposed to be on today's agenda, and I didn't do the indent on number 8. That is the agenda for the March 17th. So is there any other questions about the agenda that just got pulled up? And I'm sorry for the loose.
Sam has his hand up.
Yes, I'm Sam.
Thank you, Kathy. So question number 8, Jones Library project funding. If I understand correctly, you're indicating it's not on this agenda.
That's
And
correct.
so if we have questions related to that, we should await the subsequent meeting when that'll be on there?
Yes, but I think what underneath this section number 4, Sam, we
Yep.
can formulate some of those questions today so that Sean, when he comes in on this, knows what we want to know about some of that, Sean and/or Sean plus the library director. So yes, we don't have to wait to formulate those questions. We can do that now and send them in advance.
Kathy, can I clarify?
Yes.
I missed that for a second. I'm prepared to give an update on Jones Library if you're looking for one today. But if you're not, then I can wait. But I am prepared to give an update on sort of the financing and the cash flow. So I'll follow your lead, but.
Okay, so if you're prepared to do the update because of the way I listed it here, I had thought it would be next time that you might not. If you're prepared and we have time, we'll do that today.
You know what?
Okay?
I looked at the agenda thinking it was on there, so I prepared, but
Thank
now
you.
I see that it's under the potential agenda for next time. So
Yeah.
totally up to you, whatever you want to do.
Okay, and I think if it's okay with everyone, we'll do it based on the timing. I'm going to try to keep the meeting to no more than 2 hours as promised. Does that seem fine with everyone?
You know, I also have to say I have a hard stop at 4.
Okay,
I mean,
so
at
we,
3.
at 3. So we will stop at 3 and we'll see how, if we get to the library project funding in any depth. And then I have questions about it that I had formulated under this earlier. If we don't get them answered, we can continue to ask questions and get answers, hopefully, when we meet next, which is March 17th. So I think we can pull this off the screen. And Sean, thank you for telling me that not only did I misindent it, but you came prepared. And Sean had seen and approved this agenda, so I didn't double check it. Lynn,
Do you want to have a preliminary conversation about the Four Towns meeting on the 14th prior to the council meeting on the 9th?
it's listed there on the agenda that way, Lynn. So yeah, what I'm worried about is we only have 2 hours today. And so we'll see how fast we can get through the report. I didn't ask people to send me any comments on the report that I sent yesterday, but I thought we could go quickly through it today. And if there are only minor adjustments to it as written, then I can do a final edit of it and we can submit it to the council. I wanted to make sure it gets on the council's agenda because the council is set up on the next council meeting to be talking about the financial orders that we just did. So if that's all right with everyone, I don't know what the best way to proceed is. I sent everyone a draft of the report yesterday, marked draft. And just for anyone who's new to the finance committee, in the past, we've gotten far enough before the draft so that we could just circulate the draft and I could incorporate comments. But I thought this time, just making sure that I captured the discussion on the auditorium roof and the roads accurately enough, that I thought it would be worth making sure we discussed it today. So why don't I just ask, does anyone have any comments on the report? And if they're minor and editorial, they can just send them to me and I'll incorporate them as of tomorrow. And we can show it on the screen if people didn't have time to read it. Sam?
My comment is that I thought you did a fantastic job of summarizing the discussion, and I appreciate your efforts in generating it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Anna?
Yeah, I was gonna say you're putting GOL's reports to shame here. This is an incredibly thorough report, and I think it captured things clearly. I'm rereading it now I read it quickly this morning, but I'm gonna reread it briefly now to make sure. But thank you.
Lynn?
I'm fine with it. I've already given you my changes. Thank you. And
Okay,
you
so
incorporated them.
okay, so then I think, and Sean did a very quick read where I flagged numbers that I wanted him to check that I wasn't sure about. And so you don't see any yellow shading now because Sean already gave me the opioid settlement and made sure if I had done any math that it was accurate. So I think we're done with the report part. I did want to show you Shannon's responses. I sent her, I need to share my screen, so let me figure out how to do that. Zoom, share. And I believe this is it. Does this show up on everyone's screen?
Yes.
We had during the council meeting, when we first were discussing the schools, there was a quick discussion on whether or not they had stabilization funds, how much they had in reserve as a region. So I submitted questions through the chair of the committee, and the amazing finance director they have responded on a Sunday to give me this data. So as you can, this is literally the email I got. There is this capital stabilization fund with this amount of money in it as of June. And then the way they carry over their E&D budgets, efficiency, excess and efficiency, and Sean can explain this since he was there, but they're capped, the school is capped at no more than 5% carrying over, but I asked how much was in it and how much is being budgeted, and she answered how they were planning on using that money both in the current year and in the future year. The contingency, I asked whether they knew whether under the contingency anyone they would have to draw on it, and said it's too soon for some of these others and there are no other reserves. So what I wanted to know was, should I incorporate some of this into either as a footnote, the fact that they have a total capital stabilization fund of under 500,000, and this excess and deficiency, think of they can't carry any more than 5%, so it's like us carrying free cash at 5%. It's on a $40 million budget as of next year. So I can try to figure out where to put that in a report if anyone wants to know what, without going to the towns for more money, this is what the schools have. So I just seek any guidance on, I literally can put it in a footnote. We got the following information and I left a little box for this. So any thoughts on how to incorporate this? Lynn?
I think using the footnote is perfectly fine.
Okay. And that's what I'll do as clearly as possible. So, and she was unable, as you know, we had originally thought she might be able to join us when we were meeting, but she couldn't. So that's why I sent these things. So we are done with that portion of the agenda, if there aren't any questions on this. And I will put this email into the packet since I shared it today. All right, now how do I stop sharing? Done. So on the next piece, this would be very unusual for, at least in the time I've been on finance. We've never done it, but we have the authority, the town council has the authority to ask for information under an investigation clause. And the town council, in its rules of procedure, and only a few people would know that we have this in it, but I checked with the president of the council who pointed to me. The council has delegated that authority to any committee should we want to use it on topics that are relevant to us as a committee. So I pulled together some questions and I can share them with you now, knowing that we were going to have this discussion. So I am asking whether we want to do this, invoke this authority, and I'll put up a preliminary list and then people can look at it and say that's going too far. Some of this is in advance of the budget, wanting information. Some of it is just related to budget questions we've had for a while. And so if it's okay with people, I'll just pull up my preliminary list. Unfortunately, it's fairly long because I had a lot of time to think about it. Is that all right with everyone? Yeah, okay. Now, agenda questions. I have too many things open. Let me just, potential questions. Did that open for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so let me see if I can close this. Okay. So what I put at the top of this, and I couldn't put this into the packet in advance because these are my opinions. But these are the provisions that allow us to do this. Is Charter Section 2.8, and there's an A and a C that relates to the town and town manager, and 2.8D relates to the superintendent in school and the library director. And if we have a question, we've got to give at least five days notice. And then our town council rule of procedure 10.5G delegates this authority to committees. And this was the president of the council found this to me. So these were initial thoughts that I had based on what upcoming budget. And I've organized them just by first schools, then library, and then the town. So we've seen in both the regional and the elementary school preliminary budgets that there's a payroll projection increase of nearly 7%. And we asked, or at least I asked in the last Four Towns meeting, I wanted to know how much of that was just step increases, was COLA, and was an increase in staffing. And we didn't get an answer other than it's part of all of the above. Then there is not easy to find FTE, how many total employees are there in the schools and over the past 10 years. So I was going to ask projected FY27 compared to 5 years, the last 5 years, and compare FY27 to 10 years ago. For the elementary school, and I didn't show this one to you, we're going from 3 elementaries to 2, and just focusing on those 2, there was an estimate done from MSBA on potential savings based on line items. So I have not yet seen a projection of what the 2 schools, and I'm not talking about the 6th grade academy now, what the projections are in staffing for those schools. So asking about projected staffing. And then student enrollment is not easy to find on the town website with counts by categories. Then the last few are more for revenue issues. UMass is paying us some money each year based on students in our school system that are living on UMass campus housing, so that they're not hit by our property tax. And Lynn was there, I think, at the Donahue Institute when they did an estimate of this. The question is whether the school has information based on the address of children to be able to identify what the current count is, because that was the justification of one of the UMass agreements. This one I have already asked, and I think they're planning on doing an audit, is what share of the choice in students are special needs, and are we doing accurate billing on it? Do we audit it? And that, I think, is it. Then district office payroll and people. It's not easy when you look at the 2 budgets to say what the total district office is, what the cost of it is, and how many people, and how that's changed. So that's been my set. And I don't really know whether that's too much or not. So I'll just stop there. Lynn?
Thank you. First of all, on any staff or enrollment trends, I think it is critical to go back 20 years.
Okay.
Even if they don't have to show every year, but I think it's critical to show some benchmark years, maybe every 5 years or something for the 20 years. The other piece that I think would be critical to show in that is breaking down the student enrollment, including the special ed, because that seems to be where a lot of the stress is on the budget, is not necessarily increase in special ed, but increase in requirements for special ed. So that's number one. The second thing, and I certainly don't want to use the newspaper as my resource, but they actually did have an article today in the Gazette that talked about the goal of saving around 700,000, I believe, for the in the move to the 2 elementary schools and the academy. And the loss of, I think it was around 10 teachers.
Okay, so I made a change, and I think with all of my screen, I can't do it in track changes, so I'll just put I don't know how to I'll just put that in. Lynn changed this one to 20 years rather than 10, and I can do what you just said, Lynn. It could be every 5 years rather than consistent. And I thought the student enrollment in the past 10 years, it was total counts, ELL, SPED, low income.
That's
so
good.
not just, so that's what I tried to do under that.
But make that 20 years.
Okay. Anna.
So I'm I'm struggling to see how 20 years is actually going to give us a benchmark, given how much has changed in the landscape of, I mean, just to pick one thing, required support for special ed and all of that. And I'm trying to be cognizant of the amount of work involved in the ask. And so I'm curious if you could expand a little bit on how you picked 20 versus 10. And I say that because I feel like beyond 10 years ago, the requirements were so different. So how are we able to do that comparison? And then, similarly, I do think this is a significant ask, and I want us to be really mindful of what we're putting as a deadline on this, because I think this is a lot of information. So I'm asking the question for myself, and I guess I'll ask it of the committee too, of what piece of information will come out of each of these questions and how will it help us? Obviously, we don't know the exact information, but for example, what do we do with the information that, the FTEs have gone up or down or changed around, right? Like, how is that helpful to us? I want us to just be maybe a bit more critical of our questions, if possible, because of the amount of time that this is. I don't disagree with the questions, but I do think it's a big ask. And so I want us to just be really hypercritical of them. And then similarly, I struggle with the counts of ELL, SPED, specifically ELL and SPED, because of the different needs within those populations, right? And so how that, one ELL learner coming in with no literacy whatsoever is going to need really different supports than someone who's literate in a different language. And so how do, I struggle to figure out kind of the triaging of that and how account helps us. Does account help us on face value, or do we need more? And then I feel like we're kind of out over our skis in terms of asking for more. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to see Lynn's response, but I just wanted to point out what I tried to do, Lynn, was compare FY15 to FY25, not to ask for the full year. But I think what Anna is asking is that has something significantly changed during that time in terms of state requirements? And I know there were new state requirements on special needs staffing that have affected. So I think that's what you're saying, Anna. There's some mandates that have happened during that time period. So you can't just look at the people counts. That's what you're concerned about, correct?
yeah, just kind of what's the full story.
And that is, Anna, that's exactly why I said what I said, that I think it's important to look at the 20-year trend, because the enrollment decline started 20 years ago. But at the same time, look at both the enrollments for these various categories, and even if they want to break them down into various levels of special needs, fine. And then also, as they have begun to do, if they did the last Four Towns meeting, share with us some of the additional requirements that have been added on. And frankly, I'm trying to get to the point we can create better public understanding. That is where I'm going in all of this, because at this point, I think what's critical, particularly at some point down the road, if there is a decision to go for an override that is for the schools or any other thing, we need to build a case. And if we're going to build a case, you got to have the data. So that's one. The second thing is, let me just also add, under the payroll projections, I don't know if they have settled their contract yet, but so you want 2020 in there as well.
Thanks.
But did this 7% increase include the either soon to be settled contract or the settled contract?
So Anna, if I do, if I say provide any note,
Provide all.
yeah, but note changes in requirements.
Can I clarify? Do
Yeah.
you you're saying compare, you're not saying compare just FY15 to FY25. You're saying compare from FY15 to FY25. Is that? And Lynn is saying to do it for 20 years?
So I was originally thinking that get the last 5 years, so in
Yeah.
our recent history, and then go back to 10 years ago, FY15. And Lynn, I think, is saying going back to FY, whatever, it's 10 years earlier than that, FY05.
But Lynn, are you saying to also do every year within that span, or are you just saying?
No, no.
Okay, thank you. I think I
absolutely not.
misunderstood you. I thought that you were saying to do every
Right.
year.
So you want 2000, 2005. You really want 2005, 2010. And
Okay,
then
I can fix it.
2015. Yeah.
And
In
then,
other words, 5-year increments.
okay,
Thank you.
and I'll fix the rest of it. So the idea is, I think you're right. And Sean's hand is up. So Sean, the goal is to get some information, but limit the staff burden on getting this. And so some of these things the staff has on it. It's,
Yeah, that's what I was going to speak to. I think FY15, the data is in a similar format to what it is in now. It'll be much easier to pull that data and compare it in a consistent format. If you go back to 2005, I think it does start to increase the amount of staff time that would be required to pull it, because I started in 2010 and a lot of these trend reports started after that. And so it's not that the data is unavailable, but it would be in different formats and versions and things that it's going to be hard to like verify the it'll be like picking a point in time most likely
so
during those
Sean,
years.
do you think we could do the 2010 then? That would maybe, I actually found
Yeah,
some.
I don't think the budget that like the staffing trends report that is in the budget now really started until like 2013, 2014, something like that.
I mean, I can pull up my yearbook from 2008 and count.
Okay,
Right, right.
you know,
Again,
so.
the data's there. It's just, again, back then it was more like tracking month to month staffing. It wasn't, there wasn't, I don't remember there being like a nice annual staffing trends report prior. So
So I see Tom's hand is up, and before I go back to Lynn, Tom?
Hi, yeah, this may be information that we either already have or that we'll get under this specific request. This is a request for FTE count for staff.
Yep.
And I'm imagining staff includes faculty, admin, and other. I guess I always feel like when you're looking at trend information like this, it's interesting or useful to look at ratios. You know, people like to understand what the student-teacher ratio is. I think an interesting measure that's come to the fore is admin to teacher ratio, particularly if special needs and other kinds of administrative overhead are maybe growing at a different pace. It's worth knowing. Some of us, Kathy, Lynn, and maybe Freke was with us, were in a meeting that a presentation that Mars gave. I feel like it must have been late summer or fall at the high school library, and they provided some good comparative information within the Commonwealth. But I remember that there was a question on another ratio that people have used in the past of dollars per pupil. And that was that was dismissed as not being a useful number. And I understand why that case was made, but I guess I'm just saying, if we're going to make the ask for FTEs, it would probably be good to make sure if we can, and Sean, to your point, if we have apples to apples across this time, if we knew the number of teachers, the number of admins, and the number of students in each of those years, that's the kind of thing I would be interested in for, just from a business analysis.
So
If others think it's useful.
I'll do a quick response to that, Tom. To the extent we've asked for years that are consistent, they always have that breakdown. So there is a line in each of these two things that talks about high level teachers and stuff. So I don't know that gets as far as you would want to go. and so I'll getting much finer, trying to divide it back into dollars, how much is spent on administration versus everything else. That's trickier because of the way the central office has been changing the way they've been billed. But there is FTEs by categories if we don't overwhelm. Those are, I should say, they're regularly reported on some level. So I see both Lynn and Anna are, I think, Lynn, you're relating to, like, can we go back as far as 2010 with any consistency? And do we say if we can't, we don't want inconsistent data, that's for sure. And so I'd
Thank you.
see Lynn's hand is up and Anna's hand is up, and I can do edit. I'm taking notes. I can edit this to make it cleaner. And Anna, the other thing you said is, when would they have to get us this data? They're right in the middle. We can set a date for this that's, 4 weeks from now if we want to. It's just, we might need some of it before May, and not avoid trying to ask for it in the middle of budget issues was the goal here. So Lynn, then Anna.
I'm actually ready to move on
Okay.
to the next bullet, but if Anna's not, go ahead.
Mine is about FTEs, just a clarifying question, if that's okay.
Okay.
So one of the things that just popped into my brain is, as we're looking at FTE counts, I'm thinking about how contracted services that may be newly contracted within the past 10 years are counted. So things like transportation, I'm not sure if what the status of food service is, but I just want to context for changes where applicable would be important to note. Again, like school bus drivers, I don't know if they would count. I don't know how they count. This is my own ignorance of how that type of professional staff is counted in an FTE count for the districts and or the elementary in the district, but that would be my question.
I think
I think
that's a good one.
And that's a good one, because I think at one point, Sean, we contracted out food and then we brought it back inside, so, and then contracted for some of the specialists versus brought them in or recontracted, moved them in and out. Okay, so Lynn,
my next, so I think you want an FTE on the third bullet down, FTE elementary. Do you want FTE of staff and students, or it's just says FTE?
oh, sorry, yeah, staff.
Okay, so what I want to add is almost another bullet, and that is somewhere in here, I would hope that we would see a breakout of the costs for the 6th grade academy.
Okay. Okay, so that's a whole separate, okay, let me backspace.
Yeah, it probably is a whole separate bullet.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with this on, I'm getting blocked up at top of seeing my thing to be able to indent, so just assume this is being backspace. Okay.
That's fine.
Plus of
6th grade academy.
grade academy.
Okay. And then
Total cost. We don't need to know it by any breakdown. Okay.
right. Can I also then go, unless somebody else has something on the enrollment, on the one about UMass enrollment for K-12 living at UMass campus housing.
Yep.
If we could get a trend on that, because if I'm correct, the number has been pretty much the same ever since the original payment was made. And I don't think it's increased. And so is it comparable to what our per student cost is?
So do you just want me to make this, instead of that question, how does this count compare, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Is it comparable to our cost per pupil?
Oh, count, compare, and the payment calculation.
And is the payment
And
calculation comparable to our cost per student?
calculation.
Yeah. And in full disclosure, I was executive director of the UMass Donahue Institute when this study was done. I did not do the study. I was aware of it.
You know, Sean, this is something we talked about. And if they can't do this easily for us, the question is, do we go directly to UMass, you know, on it? So the thought was, there is an address for those village apartments that are on campus, and if they could do it just identifying by address, they would be able to do it. This is a revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think UMass is gonna tell us that. I think
Yeah.
that's from school records. I don't think they're gonna tell us who lives there and if they have kids in the schools. Again, back then there was a high number, so it wasn't identifiable data. It was just a total quantity of how many students lived in those family housing.
Right. And I also want to just make sure that we give UMass credit when they closed family housing. They continued to pay us that money for the 2
Right.
years that it was closed.
You know, this question may be a different kind of question, so I can move it to the end too. It's a revenue
It's a
source.
revenue issue.
Yeah.
It also relates to our UMass partnership agreement because it is part of the partnership agreement now. And that's coming up for renewal sometime in the next 2 years. And
Okay.
again, I'm ready to go on to the next one, but Anna's got her hand
Okay.
up, so.
Sorry. I think the discomfort that I'm still feeling with all of these is really that one of the pieces of feedback that we've heard from families, from parents, from educators, from admin is that hard numbers never are going to capture the full picture. And so I want to make sure that in all of these questions, we're leaving space for the question of why might this number not demonstrate the full picture. And I think that that's maybe in the intro is that we're welcoming that information as well, because I don't want it to, I know that we can't look just at numbers and fully understand what's going on. So I want to leave space for that maybe in the intro, Kathy, as we're going through of like, please let us know as you're responding. If there's a reason why, kind of what's the buffer, what's the room for error on this for each answer. Sorry, that was a general comment. I should have said.
I think that's absolutely correct, Anna.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
Anna, what I suggest, and I'm willing to work more on this, is once we get through the agreement on the questions, I draft a separate memo for each of
Perfect.
these, and everyone gets to review it. Did I capture the tone correctly? And so for the superintendent, she has asked that we go through the chair, and actually she's not there right now. She's on leave. So actually, who is it addressed to? But this would be a draft memo from the finance committee. So I will try to get that done by, what's said tomorrow is Wednesday, so no later than Thursday. So
Okay.
I'll try to get it done. And then with these kinds of questions, we could make a March, you know, do we need these by the middle of April, the end of April, you know, so suggest a date. Lynn, go ahead with yours. So that's, I think it's a separate memo for each of
That
these.
sounds good. Thank you.
Lynn?
I want to go to the next bullet on special needs. The issue of billing is just a small piece of it. Let me try to backtrack. My understanding is that when we move to a more inclusive, greater services to higher need students held within the school, so that we did not have to pay as many out-of-school placement costs, okay? We developed different programs. I had an opportunity to briefly visit, or if you will, those programs that are going on at Wildwood, and I'm assuming that they'll be moving to the new elementary school to Amethyst Brook. One of the things I learned was that depending on the level of need, of course, depends on the reimbursement. But at one point, when we first started providing those services, we actually had slots that we would sell to outside districts, and they would pay to place their student in our district for those services. My understanding is the demand for those services has now, at least as of last year, I don't know this year, has become so great that we don't have any slots available to sell. And so I think it's a useful issue to know what level of services, what level of costs, what number of students, and are we even able to take any out of school placements on that. Okay.
And just the reason for anyone, when we get a choice in student, the flat amount is $5,000 that the sender district sends us. But if the child has special needs, you can bill the sending district for the additional costs. And so the only question that I was trying to ask, we are getting almost $10,000 per choice in student. So clearly there is a billing system in place that's saying they're above the 5,000. And this is just a question, do we need an audit or not? And we might not need to include this in this set because it was asked at two separate points, and Shannon said that they would check up on this, that it was a good thing to audit. So we could make the list shorter by eliminating these because she already has it on her to-do list. Sam? You're muted.
Thank you, Kathy. I've been listening to the comments of others, and I think I understand the intent of the questions related to the school enrollments. Um, I believe that comparing apples to apples is important. What I'm hearing and discerning from this discussion is that really what we're trying to do is to gain an idea of uh, how the burden of funding and delivering services from an extent standpoint may have changed based on the composition of students, special needs versus regular, as well as the revenue aspects of choice and out of in and out. The UMass one, that's really who lives where. I, for whatever reason, anytime we're asking people, I realize it's a generic summary, what part of town they're in. I'm like, well, I'm not certain about that. But I gather that's again from the revenue aspect. Um, so,
Just as background, Sam, there is an agreement from UMass that they're
Yeah.
paying, so that's a question of, is the count still accurate or not?
I understand. So overall, I would just say that it makes sense to compare apples to apples. And if we don't have the data going back 2005, and even 2010, if we started tabulating this in 2013, I'd advocate for the point in time where the data is comparable. And I understand the value of FTEs. I do think it makes sense, as what Tom indicated, to clarify between student facing teachers versus administration, if available. And from my own perspective, prior to seeing these questions, I've always uh, wondered how the changing burden of the school system has developed based on higher expense needs of students. So I think that information could be helpful from 2015 through now, based on what you've asked.
Thank you. And I can capture some of this in the memo too. Now, this last one, I'm not even sure how relevant it is, but when I look at the two budgets, and Sean, you can tell me whether this is accurate, I'm not sure you can easily say how much does the district office total, what is the total cost for that and payroll costs of it? Because we distribute it back to the elementary schools in the region. So if it's easy to see this, then this question may not be. It gets a little bit, Tom, at the question you asked. So this is on some level it's an administrative cost, but it has everything in it. It has the finance director, it has some other directors, and it has the superintendent. So I'm not sure whether to include this one or not.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on the last one? Because then I'm moving on to Jones. And these were just, I knew this was coming, so I came more prepared. Lynn?
I'm just trying to calculate whether 3 years goes back to and covers the prior administration. And to be fair, it would only be fair if you went all the way back and made sure you covered the last year that Mike Morris was fully on staff.
So do give me a count, any,
I'm thinking it's more like 5 years
okay.
to get a good picture, because there, I will just say that in conversations with the superintendent, the central office was pretty much decimated at one point, and I think she's built it back up. The question is, how does that compare to previous administrations? And the only way to do that is to make sure you go all the way back to Mike Morris's last full year,
All right. So,
which I think is about 5 years now.
okay. Are people ready to move to the next group? Great. Okay, so Jones. When we were first talking about the Jones project and the expansion of floor space, we asked whether there was going to be a need for more staff to staff the bigger building. And the answer was potentially a part-time additional custodial staff. All this is this still the case, in terms of staffing at the new building? Then the rest goes into the endowment fund and the plan drawn by 27, and Sean may be answering some of these today. So the trustees, how much they've contributed to the project to date, and show separately the amount they got from grants, some from CPA, Amherst College, and HUD. The building project, itself, the agreement with the town says the trustees are going to pay the balance they owe when MBLC pays the last grant, which when we wrote it first said 2027, or 1 year after occupancy if that closure was delayed, and that was June 2028. I don't know what those dates are now. So what's the estimated amount of that payment? How will the trustees pay? And what's the remaining balance of the endowment? And the draw needed for the operating budget. And then I'm just rattling through these so we can go back. Then during the time that the library trustees have not contributed the full share, the town has taken out short-term bands, short-term bond interest, and so we are carrying a higher share than we would otherwise. Is there a way of calculating that? And Sean is the only one who would know whether we can identify that cost. And that my last one was just, I happened to look at the Forbes library budget to the extent I could pull it off the Northampton, and it seemed to be quite a bit lower than the Jones library budget, the town taxpayer share of it. And I didn't find out the amount from their endowment or not. So it was just a question of how did the two compare? I don't think we've ever compared our library operating costs to other libraries, and I picked one in a neighboring town. So that's my Jones set. And again, some of this may be with what Sean has already prepared for today. So the concern is both that the library may be short on money and that the town's out-year budgets may be more affected by all of this than we know right now if the library can't come up with their share. That's why it's budget related. Any reaction to this set? Again, I'll do it as a separate memo for people to be able to read with not a reply tomorrow on it. Lynn?
With regard to the bullet on the band.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you make an assumption there. I'm not clear that that's a true assumption. So it would be, how does this compare to what might have been projected?
How?
I could speak to that today or whenever I give the update.
Okay.
Okay, should I just delete it then, Sean?
No,
that
I
you're
mean,
already.
I think the question's fine. I can answer it or, begin to answer it. I think some of these questions are definitely going to require the library, the library to respond, but that one in particular I can speak to.
So you want compared to what was anticipated, Lynn?
Projected,
Projected.
to the extent that, we had accurate projections.
Okay.
They're always accurate projections, Lynn. I hope.
Thank you.
So you wanted, we always knew we were going to do this. So the question is, has it
Right.
been higher than we thought? That's what
Right.
you want that to say.
Sure.
And on the next one regarding Forbes, this is kind of like the issue of comparing DPWs to DPWs.
Okay.
'Cause you can't look at Forbes and just say, why are they lower? You have to look at what the programs are they're providing. I mean, I don't know how robust a youth program they have. I don't know how robust they have in terms of some of the other programs our library does. So there's got to be some program comparison in order to do a comparison of costs.
So would you delete this altogether or would you expand it?
I have no problem doing comparisons. I just want to make sure, again, we're comparing to apples.
Anna,
I'm kind of curious who they would say to compare them to. I think that would be interesting in and
Yeah.
of itself, right? Like if it's not necessarily our neighboring communities, who is it that they would consider their peer so that we can understand where their benchmark is? And Kathy, I think it's a fair question to say, what is different from us versus Hadley, Northampton, South Hadley, whatever it is. Why is ours different? I think is a fair question. But I also think, if who should we compare you to? And
so if not compared to Forbes, is there another comparison? Does
yeah,
that? Yeah.
I think that's fair.
And Lynn, I added, are the programs offered different? What else?
Right.
I looked, we have 2 branches, but our branches are only part-time branches. They have one, but that's open 7 days a week. I don't know whether they think of Lily as a branch or just a separate but it's encompassed, and I added the numbers. Okay.
And by the way, I think keeping these questions all in one place is good because it's a check then for us as to what we've heard.
Sam.
Thank you, Kathy. Lots of questions there. The ones that came to my mind with this being on the subject, and you've covered some of it, essentially is how is the library doing and compared to their plan of payments? In other words, what was the initial expectation of payment dates and amount made and where we're at? So if they could provide a status from the start of the program till now in terms of how they're doing in terms of what were the planned payments and what the unmet amounts are. So I recognize the interest and other items indicate, burden on the town, but what I'm primarily concerned about from an informational standpoint.
Does that do it? How have payments to the town compared to what the trustees expected?
A table, I guess, or something that would indicate each year. And my guess is that this already exists. How are they doing in terms of what they had projected to be able to pay?
Okay.
And where they are and what's their plan to meet the commitments through the end of the project.
Okay.
Because I think what we're talking about here, the general nature of this is to gain information on what might be coming down the road that we can see now that the town might have to wrestle with.
Yep.
If there are gaps. And that will relate to what was the initial understanding and expectation of payments, where are we now? And if there's a gap, which I think there is, how are we going to address that? And these questions that you've been asking, some of them lay the groundwork for that. I think a simple summary of that. I know they've the Jones, I've seen a few of the meetings, have presented this information in the past, so it would probably be an update, but it would provide background and or current information for those who
Okay,
are interested.
So I've added, how does it compare to what was projected? What's the remaining balance? And then for us to give us a table.
Yeah, not just for 2027, I guess is
Yeah.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And, you know, have there been changes? You know, there was one grant that was removed, you know, but whatever the expectations are, it's really kind of it's not a cash flow, but it's uh, you know, a debt, for lack of a better term, payment, and
Yeah.
how we're gonna,
Well, and the
where are we gonna
trustees,
be at?
no, and the trustees may or may not have been able to collect on every pledge. You know,
Oh, of course.
to convert them to convert all of those to
It's
money.
not,
Yeah.
it's certainly not an easy process to raise a ton of
Okay.
money and collect, but I think it would be helpful for the town and for members to know where exactly are we at this fixed point in time, and perhaps we should have had this discussion after Sean speaks. I don't know, but I'm
Okay,
bringing it up
so
now
if we can,
because
so what
here-
I'm gonna suggest is we leave this, we listen to Sean, and then we
Okay.
figure out if a few of these got answered.
Okay,
And then I will keep them all in one place, so, but I'll then branch them out to separate memos to the respected people.
thank you,
So,
Ken.
are we ready to, I'm sorry to just dump this on, these are pent-up questions. So a while ago, or actually a resident sent me police overtime pay and hours, and the overtime pay and the hours look really high. And some of that, or a lot of it, might be to detail work that's not paid by the town the way we count hours. So they may have worked just an hour, but in our scale it counted for 2 hours. And so this is there a policy capping outside hours so that we don't have people working 40 hours for the town and another 30, because detail work, in case people haven't seen, pays a lot of money. The town manager had said he didn't know the answer to this and would get answers. So I thought I would just ask it again. Fire EMS. When we talked about staffing in the fall and we did guidelines, we talked about the earlier staffing analysis, and that was done just before Hadley left us. And there's a question, had there been an update on the study of staffing needs? And do we have peak load challenges or ongoing challenges? And so I think it was a question of, how much are we short-staffed? Are we short-staffed just when there's an emergency or constantly? Then DPW staffing and expense budget. The council supported a while ago a market wage study comparing our staff to others. I'm not sure whether we included the DPW staff and all the DPW staff. So it's just a question of, did we do the study? And if yes, what were the findings? What's been the turnover rate in staff? How many staff have been on staff for more than 5 years? Are there training cost consequences of turnover? And then the other thought was on sewer and water, our enterprise funds, when we budget them, a share of DPW payroll and benefits is billed to the enterprise funds. I'm not sure how much the total DPW staffing and everything is billed to those. And do the rates that we have in place for sewer and water allow for increases, including contractual for payroll? So Lynn, it's like your question for the schools. Have we already built them in for payroll? We flagged this after last year's budget review, that the expense budgets of DPW, and that should say other major departments, had been literally frozen at dollar levels. So they were regularly going over budget, whether it was for supplies for DPW or police and fire. So it's a question, our FY27 budget's going to be budgeted to include increased costs for expenses and supplies for DPW. this is one, Sean, it's a duplicate of what we just asked in JCPC. It's hard to find an accounting of the total amount of roads money we have from Chapter 90, because it's come in from two streams. It's the regular Chapter 90 and the fair share, the town capital appropriations and others. So I'm going to stop there because I see Anna's hand is up. So this is getting into a bunch of other questions. Anna, and the town thing went on because I was expanding it as I was listening. Anna.
Fair enough. And I think this is kind of getting at what you are talking about in the, if you can scroll down a little bit, miss expense budgets. I think that there's even more broken out parts. I think that one of the questions I know this isn't possible, and Sean, I am clarifying that I know this isn't possible, but in my brain, what my brain wants is a line, is a graph showing, you know, how much land we've acquired or how much the population has increased and how much the operating budgets have increased or not, right? And so I think this is kind of what you're getting at, but I think what the piece that's missing is, you know, how much has been added? How much, and I know that that's such a relative question, and I'm struggling to put it succinctly because it's partly land, it's partly use has increased, it's partly type of maintenance has increased, right? So the spray park takes a different type of maintenance in a different part of DPW than new athletic fields. But where's the, how do we tease that apart to ensure that operating budgets are meeting the needs when we've increased the demand?
So does it have, we added to expense budgets as the town expands playgrounds, parks, etc.?
I would say proportionately, and if not, how are we under? I'm gonna go ahead and confidently say we're not over.
Lynn,
I actually want to go up to the top and come down. On fire EMS. We only ever provided EMS services to Hadley in my knowledge. So it's not fire, but I think what now is important is to understand what is Hadley's budget crisis going to do in its demand for fire services from us. So I just want to make sure we're asking the right question. We never provided fire. We only provided EMS.
okay, should
Just
I
need to
just
keep
change
the-
it to, should I just change it to EMS then,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
Okay,
But no, you should
We don't
leave
keep-
the whole title as fire and EMS because
okay, after
the
Hadley
immediate
left.
question is staff study after
Cost
Hadley,
for EMS.
right? And then
Okay.
now the issue is with Hadley's budget crunch, what impact is that having on us for fire?
Yep.
Supposedly their contract EMS is, although they're not, their contract EMS is not at the same level our EMS is. We have a
And I
higher,
still want to know about it though.
I agree with you, totally.
Does that work? With Hadley budget crunch, what impact is
On Amherst Fire and EMS.
an Amherst Fund? I will make this fix typos.
And then on the DPW expense staff, I know this question came up last night, so let's just leave it there. It seems to me on the expense budgets for DPW and other, I think what you're talking about is the operating budgets, not the
I
person.
apologize. Yes.
Okay, but the reality is, as we've expanded our property, the cost is not just expansion of expenses, operating expenses, it's also personnel. So it's personnel and non-personnel.
You know, because they're two separate buckets. One is the need for more labor time, and the other is the need for more grass seeds, tar, salt.
Right.
You know, name whatever we call the budget. You know, one of the things you can see in JCPC, and Sam, I see your hand is up, is a few of the things that DPW used to provide out of their budget, street lights, changing them over is now a capital request. So a few things have been moved. But they're only the bigger items, Lynn. They're not, the other pieces. So, meanwhile, yeah, anyway, I see Sam's hand is up.
Thank you, Kathy. There's a lot of questions and detail requested here, and I'm not sure how promptly some of this information can be gathered. In general, I like the concept that I discerned from Anna's question regarding the general trends in new work for the DPW versus current work. That was raised, we heard the other day. And in general, as it relates to these questions, it's the deltas that are of interest to me, similar to the school. It's what has changed in the current projections versus what had changed in the past. I have less, concern about the specific details of, who worked how many hours here, there, and the other place, but the general overall top level departmental allocations. I'm not certain how, well, I guess we'll have to find out how quickly and easily this information could be provided that we're asking. But in terms of prioritizing the requests, I would prioritize the top level buckets, for lack of a better term, of the departments and what are the primary changes, new expenses and otherwise from prior years.
And I'm going to think of what the wording change that needs to, there's, I think we
I'm not
are.
sure that it needs to.
Okay, but emphasize that we're talking about the change. It's not the, so there's very few equipment that's labor saving here. This is labor intensive work, so yeah, Anna.
I know. Okay. So I think that there's the piece here, and then I mean, the question for everybody, maybe because it hits everybody, inflation isn't necessarily the talking point here, but I want to note that all of these operating budgets, all of these expenses are going to be slammed by inflation, not just the addition of new property. And I think that while everyone is hit by this, DPW is hit particularly hard, given the amount of resources that they utilize comparatively to like fire or police, right? Because they're bringing in literal material. So I mean, I want to ask about inflation, but I don't know if that means we have to ask about inflation for everyone. And it could be that is too much in the weeds and we don't need to, but I'd love to hear if other folks on the committee think it would be helpful for us to understand how inflation has impacted different areas or not. And I'm happy to let it go if people are like, it's kind of going to be a wash, but I'm not sure that it is when you look at the different areas.
Well, I think
Maybe John or Paul has
I think IT would tell us that some of the
fair.
the licensing costs have gone up a lot.
Absolutely.
So whether we want to, so I think your question is, should we focus mainly on DPW here, or should we ask a more generic?
Yeah.
And Sean and Paul were in the room. Paul may have left the room as we got to this section, but we're also trying to do it in a way that they're answerable rather than it's a whole research project. Right?
100%. And it could be that this is just too in the weeds and not helpful. Again, thinking about what information are we getting?
Yeah. Sam?
If I understand correctly, Anna, you're asking what are the changes in expenses for ongoing services based on
Inflation.
higher prices? In other words,
Yeah.
specific inflation as opposed to generic overall inflation, such as we're giving a 3.5% budget increase. You're inquiring what has tangibly changed in terms of their current services, the expenses now versus prior years, as opposed to an economic inflation number.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, Guilford, for example, talked about the increased cost of tar.
Right, exactly. That's what was in my head.
A road costs more, a mile of road costs more because tar is more expensive.
Right.
And
Yeah, exactly.
we haven't figured out how to have a drone do the tar a non-human applied the tar yet.
Maybe
Sam,
escalation is a more appropriate term than inflation.
I don't know that your comment on tar, Kathy, raised a thought in my mind, which is, are there different grades of durability for tar that we use on our roads?
right,
And I think that this actually down the road in the long term is an issue that could be significant. In other words, are there materials for roads that last longer than others,
yeah,
even if they might be less uh,
so some of these, what we might
environmentally ideal?
So when we get this set, we might want to reserve some of them for a specific conversation with Guilford and staff during the DPW review in May. On this, where are there critical points? So what you're saying is drill down a bit more that we're okay here, but here it's 50% more expensive than it used to be.
What I'm really
There's no alternative, or there is an alternative that would be better. Yeah.
What I'm really saying is not specific to this budget. It's
Yeah.
longer term planning.
Yeah.
If roads is a massive expense down the road, can we switch to a new material that might have a much longer lifespan than the current ones? It's not for this set of questions, but I think it's important for the long-term planning if we could, if there are materials that cost more to put to utilize, but they last 1.5 times as long. I think that's a discussion at this point, regardless of what occurred in the past, that might be warranted.
Okay, I see Sean's hand is up, and I'm worried that we're at 2:19, so I'm also looking at the clock. So we could, Sean, you
Yeah,
should
real
talk.
quick, I
and-
just wanted to ask, are you, I mean, is the expectation that these are responded to as part of the like budget presentation when they come back to finance committee? So like the library and the schools, for example, will be coming to finance committee in April, potentially to speak to, speak to their budgets, or do you want them sooner? Just going back to the staff time, like this is the month where staff are spinning the fastest to get the budgets ready, especially the library and the schools right now to get their budgets ready for voting this month. I guess the question is there a difference to this committee if these are answered before or after they present their budget? Because I don't know that their responses to these questions are going to change what they're going to propose for a budget this month at this point.
I think that's a great question. So when the first set with the schools, can we expect these questions when we come to the budget discussions? Or do we, and that's in May. And the same would be for the library.
Yeah.
And which do we want sooner than that? And then for the town, I'm seeing Paul's hands up. Town, some of this is focused on particular areas. Others that I'm about to get into is grants that are available, property that we could turn into money earning. Those don't need to be answered now. So we could do the whole town set maybe during the budget hearings, the budget oversight. Paul.
I had the similar question to Sean. I think these are really good questions that we would slot in during the budget presentations and have them pre-answered. They're very good questions. I think too, I think, and again, with Sean, our folks are working, Sean in particular is working like overtime trying to get our budget put together. For Sam's questions regarding the roads, there will be a presentation to the town services and outreach committee in April. We'll get that date to you by the town engineers that would talk a lot about road treatments and all the level of details you were asking about, Sam, in terms of and what the cost implications are of that, but also just how they choose to treat roads. It'll be a really interesting presentation. I think every counselor should hear it. But so I think that's a venue for your questions instead of the finance committee necessarily.
So,
Yep.
so let me propose, in interest of time, so we can get to at least part of the rest of this, that we come back to the discussion of questions for the town next meeting. And I'll just let you see what's here. And we can put it in the packet then, so people can have any other thoughts they would have. And that most of these questions would be flagged for May. A few of these, Anna, you're going to recognize complete streets, sources of grants, sources of outside
Oh,
money.
yeah.
We might want to split them to a different topic altogether because there are their revenue. And then the South Street School property, we did designs on it. We paid for a consultant. What's the plan, to put it back on the property tax roll? So a few of these are different. And so my suggestion would be, I send this to you as it is now, and we come back to the town side and split them into two that are budget related. And then we put it on the agenda for the March 17th meeting. Sam,
Yes,
how do you react to that? The Wildwood School is the last one. If the
I
If
didn't
this-
intend to have my hand raised.
Oh,
If-
okay, I sorry. So is people comfortable with, that's kind of the end. Wildwood, the question came up, actually, a resident sent it in, that if the schools say we don't want it, Wildwood anymore, and give it to the town, and we take over Wildwood starting in September or October of this year, will we just close it down, or does the town have to pay for its utility costs? So it's purely does some part of Wildwood go on the town budget separate from the elementary schools? And so I put that one in because I saw it come in from a resident. So do people, I guess the response is two things: is can we stop talking about this and come back to the questions for the town, and think of the school questions as for when we see them, and give them plenty of time to know that these questions are coming. And same with the library, other than what we're going to hear from Sean today. And then on the 17th, come back to the DPW, town, roads, everything else questions, fire, to refine them, since it's a pretty long list, and do that next meeting. Sam.
Thank you, Kathy. Regarding the South Street School property, as I read your questions here, you're referencing three possible designs were prepared. Consulting funds, I attended those meetings, and that, of course, or this is under the assumption that it's going to be housing. And my understanding is that hasn't been determined as of yet. So in terms of your question of what's the timeline to decide, it may be a timeline to decide not simply between three designs, but rather might there be longer term alternative uses? And I think that's kind of what you're getting at here. But when I see the first bullet item being three possible designs were prepared, it seems to lead to the context that that's what is being discussed in terms of timeline to decide.
Yep.
Because I think the presentations, and there was a lot of work gone into them, relate specifically to that option for
Okay,
the building,
so-
but there could be other options.
So I added it to housing or other,
Yeah.
just so you know, it's on the building list of, we spend money on that building every year, so it's a little bit of money, not a lot of it, but so I think this is a separate category. So what I'm suggesting is we move off this list and come back to it on the 17th and split them into two categories, because some of them have more to do with grant opportunities and turning a property from a cost to a revenue stream. How do we make those decisions? Wildwood, at some point, we have to make a decision of what to do with the Wildwood property too. The same kind of question comes up, holding on to it or not holding on to it. And these may not be just finance, TSO or others may be thinking about, this is land use and surplus property. So I can't see everyone, but is everyone comfortable of stopping on the town related for now, coming back to them on the 17th? I send this whole list to everyone after we get off this meeting. I separate the two memos, the school's memo and the library memo, so you can review those. And then we can move on to the rest of the agenda. Yes? I see everyone's
Yes.
nodding. All right, I will stop sharing. I think. The next, the other items, and I think it'd be better to hear from Sean first on Jones, so changing the agenda item. I will resend the suggested finance committee meeting schedule, since Lynn said she didn't see it posted in the packet, but I suggested that we meet on Thursdays of the weeks in May from 1 to 3. And I added one meeting in November. That's the only change to the agenda. So I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with doing that. And I added the 17th of November to the agenda. But we can talk about it next meeting, because the other thing I did is I did specifics in May. When will we talk about schools? When will we talk about this? When will we talk? And we could talk through that sequence with a little bit more time. So I'm suggesting we wait for the 17th for that, if everyone's comfortable with it. And Anna, that you put on the list, the talking about what we might want to hear from departments, who we might want to hear from in the fall,
Yeah.
could be moved to next week. The
That's fine.
17th right now is, we don't have CPAC, the Community Preservation Act, I thought was going to be referred to us by the 17th of March, and it's not. So we've got time on the 17th for some of these discussions. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, Sean, now we're on the item that I thought I had listed for March 17th. Jones.
Thank you, Kathy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can everyone hear Sean? And
So,
if the questions we've raised aren't answered today, we'll come back to it.
yeah, I
On
think
the
this will
17th.
cover most of them, and I'm sure there'll be some follow-up questions. So, the update today is not going to be on the project budget. We're planning on presenting project budget updates at the building committee level. So that is on the agenda for Monday. So questions on how the project is going in terms of, are we on budget? What's our contingency look like? Those types of questions. I'm not planning to address those today. Those would be discussed in more detail on Monday with the building committee. And we can certainly share for that presentation, we're going to have more of a report. This is more of a oral update to this committee, but for that one, we plan to have more of a report, and we can share that with this committee. So before we get into the financings, we went out to get our bond rating updated. So the good news is we were reaffirmed at a AA+ bond rating. I don't know if I filled the committee in on that yet. We were a little, not, I want to say nervous, but we got the sense from the bond rating agencies that Massachusetts sort of has a general negative outlook because of, federal policies and how they interact with Massachusetts, the overall economy. But in particular, I think it was sort of how Massachusetts and our reliance on higher education and how important that is. And that has sometimes been the target of federal policies. So there was a general negative outlook, but we were happy that our rating was reaffirmed at a AA+, and it was reaffirmed with a stable outlook. When they give you your rating, they can give you a negative outlook, a stable outlook, positive outlook, and we were reaffirmed at AA+ with a stable outlook. The commentary on the credit rating very similar. We'll post it on the website if it's not posted there already, but very similar to prior years in terms of the factors that led to that rating. And the two biggest things that prevent us from getting a AAA rating continue to be our long-term liabilities, in particular OPEB and our pension. Our pension is becoming honestly more of a positive because our funding percentage is up in the 70-80% range now, which is really good for a big liability like that. We're one of the better systems in the state. But our OPEB liability, while good relative to other communities, it's not anywhere near where pensions are funded for the most part. We're like 20% funded for OPEB. So that's one factor. And then the other factor is that our income per capita is always skewed very low because of the college students. And we tried to make the case with the bond rating with S&P to consider alternatives. We presented some alternatives, but we have been unsuccessful at swaying them to consider a different, basically a carve out in their model for Amherst. There really aren't other communities in Massachusetts, or very few communities in Massachusetts that are like us, where almost 50% of the population is college students with very low reported income, and that drives down our per capita income, which is a negative on the bond rating. So those are really the two barriers, and one of them we can do something about with funding OPEB, and the other one we can't really do anything about. So right now we have two financings for the library. We have a permanent financing for 15.8 million, and that is for 30 years at a rate of 3.85%. That came in a little bit lower than where we've seen the market, so we were excited. And just so everyone knows, when we go out for all financings, whether it be a permanent financing or short term, it's done through a competitive process. So we work with our financial advisor. They basically put it out to bid, sort of like we do when we buy something like a piece of equipment, and banks bid on the debt. And we take the lowest cost to the town is how we move forward with that. So the annual debt service for that permanent financing is about $40,000 lower per year than what we were projecting. So if you were to look at our preliminary capital plan for FY27, that was based on estimates. Now we have an actual debt schedule. So if you were to look at the estimates in that for our debt for this project at the end of that report, when we update this before we present it to the council, it'll be about $40,000 lower per year. So that was positive. And now we have a fixed schedule with which to pay the town share of this project going forward.
Sean, can you take just a quick question? Did
Sure.
you go out for a 20-year bond? What was the
It was
term?
it was a 30-year borrowing.
30, so you have a fixed number, and in JCPC, as we go out to the outer years, is that the number we see?
In JCPC, you see a higher number because
Okay.
we were estimating a higher interest rate
Okay.
than what we actually got. So
Okay.
the numbers that you see in JCPC will come down a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The other borrowing, and I think this is more of what speaks to your question, is we borrowed 13.8. $1 million is really for CPA, and the other 12.8 is to cover cash flow needs from now to the end of the project. So we're in sort of the home stretch of the project. The date where it's expected to be completed is March 2027, so about a year from now. Our short-term borrowing is for 1 year. And the interest rate on that was 2.25%. So the annual interest cost for that borrowing is about $286,000. Now, the thing to remember with all borrowings, we actually make some money back on investment returns as well. So we get all the money at the beginning, and so that money sits in a interest-bearing account, of which right now the rates are pretty good. So some of that we get back. I think the question that was that you discussed earlier was how much have we had to date? We really haven't had any to date because we only had to date, we've been relying on MBLC money, fundraising, and we had a small ban of about 2.8 million. And you can't really say whether that 2.8 million was for the town share or the library share. But now, this 13.8 or really the 12.8 of that is really for the libraries, not just the library share and the MBLC, because we're also waiting on MBLC payments. We were going to have some sort of temporary borrowing no matter what because of the way the MBLC works, where they space it out over, originally it was out over 5 years. Now it might be a little bit longer because there's a 6th payment in there. So where are we? So MBLC payments are kind of important. So this debt is going to basically end next March. And at that point, we're going to evaluate the project and determine how much we need to roll over. We don't anticipate having to borrow any more than what we've borrowed in terms of short term. So we don't anticipate having to borrow more than 12.8 for the share from MBLC in the library. But we might have to roll over a smaller amount basically to get us through the end of the sort of the closeout of the project. Now, so MBLC, we are optimistic that we might get a payment this year. Our last payment from MBLC was in FY25. We're optimistic that we might get a payment between now and June. There's nothing set in stone or guaranteed at this point that we will definitely get a payment, but we're optimistic that we will. If we do get a payment, that would give us a payment this fiscal year, and then we would expect a payment in FY27 and a final payment in FY28. And sometimes the MBLC does things a little bit differently based on their cash flow and their funding. So I don't have a set schedule. That might be something when the library comes, they might have more information, but at this point, I don't have a set schedule when we're definitely going to receive each payment. I know there's different milestones in terms of close out of the project that trigger the final payment. But I know they've also made exceptions and done things based on their cash flow. So again, we have this short-term borrowing through March of 2027, and we will likely have one more short-term borrowing for a smaller amount after that. And that amount will be based on what additional funds we've received from the library and what additional MBLC payments have been made at that point. And all of that was incorporated into the capital plan already. So the plan, the capital plan that's been presented to JCPC, we've known since the beginning of this project that there was going to be some short-term carrying costs for the different funding sources that make up this project. It actually should come down a little bit as well because the interest rate came in better than what we were estimating. So again, that portion and the debt schedule at the back of the capital plan should come down a little bit from what was presented to JCPC. All right.
Sam, did you have a question as someone was going through it? Can you hold it till the end?
I could hold it.
Okay.
I got just a couple more things. So just a recap, and you touched on this earlier, Kathy. So the MOU that we have with the library basically says that they will make their kind of final payment to the town or whatever is left to the town on June 30th, 2027, which would be the end of FY27, which at that point that the MOU was written was when we thought we might get the final MBLC payment. Or if for any reason final MBLC payment is delayed beyond that point, that we would get it within 12 months of the certificate of occupancy for the building. So assuming we get the certificate of occupancy for the building sometime in the spring of 2027, sometime in March, April, maybe earlier, depending on when they wrap everything up. The latest we would expect to get the final payment from the library would be 12 months from that point. So spring of 2028. So that's why I said there might be a need for one final little piece of borrowing potentially. So MBLC, the total amount we're expecting to get from them is a little over 15 million. It got increased, which was good sometime, in the last few years, I think after I left and before I came back, they increased it a couple $1 million, which was nice. So we've received 8.3 million from MBLC, which equals roughly the first three payments. And we expect another 7+ million in the final three payments. Again, one thing to know with this project, some good, some, led to higher costs, but it is what it is. A lot of the money we had early on, so we were able to generate interest from it. So for example, MBLC, they paid, a couple of their payments very early on in the project, or at least the first payment very early on. And then they gave us 2 additional payments before all, based on milestones that were hit. So we've been generating interest on that. We've generated a couple $100,000 of interest on MBLC payments. There's been interest generated on the fundraising portion. Now, as this project is starting to pick up and it's starting to spend money rather quickly because we're in this home stretch now. So that's going to start to wind down a little bit. But I will say we have been able to generate a solid amount of interest on the funding sources that were given to the project early on before construction really started. But going forward, we're expecting a monthly cost to be in the $2 to $3 million range between construction invoices and design and everything that goes with it. And then the last piece, so library trustee fundraising. So again, one thing I want to caution is what the library trustees have raised in terms of commitments and other promises, obligations is different than what's been turned over to the town. And what I'm going to outline is what's been turned over to the town. So I just want to, there may be information that they've shared that includes commitments and other things. I want to be clear, that's not the information I'm sharing. This is literally what's been turned over. So we have received about 5.4 million. We recently received the 1.1 million from them in the last few weeks. So that's gone up just recently. And of this amount, 500,000 is to pay for additional design services. So it doesn't count towards the 13.8. So 13.8 million is the library trustees' share of the project budget. Of the 5.4 million that they've turned over to date, 500,000 doesn't count towards that because it's for additional design work that had to happen when the bids came in higher, and to kind of rework those bids. And so there was an agreement that would not count. So I just want to be clear. So they've contributed 5.4. Of that 5.4, about 4.9 counts towards the target. So with the target being 13.8, they've turned over 4.9 to the town. That leaves about 8.9 remaining to be turned over. And again, they would have for our MOU, the trustees have till either June 30th, 2027, or spring of 2028, depending on when the certificate of occupancy is issued.
Right, so Sam's hand was up, and then I have questions, but I'm looking for questions from others through that yeoman going through numbers for us. Thank you, Sean. Sam,
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Sean, for information, clarity of communication. A lot going on there, summarized what I think is easy to understand. But I didn't hear what you referenced as the interest rate on the 15.8 30-year bond. What was that rate? Was it 3.5 or
3.85. So it's a
3.8?
little, it kind of depends. So that was part of a bond that had other projects being bonded. We bonded the ladder truck, we bonded the pumper truck. There were a bunch of projects that came due. So the net interest on the whole package is 3.7. But they assign individual rates based on the pieces of it. So the average for the whole package was 3.7, but this piece is 3.85.
Thank you. And if I heard correctly, the library share, MLC, you referenced a shorter term borrowing of 13.8 at 2.25%. Is that correct?
Correct. And that 13.8, again, $1 million of it is actually the CPA project. So we didn't permanently borrow that one yet. Will be the next go around, or we might just pay it off as a ban potentially. It's a small enough amount. We have to work through that. But so that 13.8 is 2.25.
And am I correct in my understanding that the town carries that amount, but that it is accounted for as a component of the library share?
No, so that is a project cost. So that's a cost that we have to pay as part of the capital plan. The library has to raise their amount of 13.8.
So the 13.8 is the amount they'll contribute
Right.
towards that borrowing, but the interest is carried by the town. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And last question, not specifically related to Jones, but you referenced two items that you were wondering about when our bond rating was AA+. It was the second one that has always been a question for me in my mind for at least the last 8 years. The OPET rating, you said we've contributed 20% to that approximately. How do you see that going forward? Not with a big summary, just in general.
Yeah, I mean,
I've
it's going
always
to be
wondered about that.
Yeah,
That hidden cost that people may not be aware of.
It's going to be up to the council, and this might be a summer topic for finance committee. The town has done really good getting it up to 20% in a relatively short time frame. The liability bounces all over the place because it's related to health insurance and different assumptions that the actuaries use. So I've seen it, go up $10 million in a year and drop $10 million in a year, and that's a pretty big percentage of the liability. But the big question will be our retirement assessment. Knock on wood that there's no major economic downturn that's prolonged, is on track to be funded by 2033. So at that point, there's the retirement system is working through kind of a phase down of the assessment. About half of our assessment is related to funding that unfunded portion. So when it's fully funded, that half of the assessment theoretically can go away. But the retirement system is working through, is it going to kind of ease that over multiple years so it's not like a cliff in terms of the assessment? But whatever they do, the town will have lower costs. And the one idea is, do we then shift some of that funding, maybe not all of that funding, but do we shift some of the savings there, because it'll be in the millions of dollars over time, to OPEB, so that we can fully fund the OPEB. And the OPEB liability number is not nearly as big as the retirement number. So it will not, that number could be funded pretty aggressively, and we could get it to a good place, in a decade if the town wanted to. So.
Thank you. So 7-year, we hope to have it funded at that point and then be, have greater flexibility.
Yep.
Appreciate your providing that information. Thank you.
Yep.
So Sean, I want to go back through the quick math we just got,
Sure.
just to make sure I wrote it down. So 13.8 owed, $1 million of which is CPAC. Or well, just about $1 million. So that leaves 12.8. Is any of that 12.8 due from Amherst College, or had they already paid the $1 million they pledged?
Right. So there's two 13.8s, and it's just a coincidence. So I'll go through that part one more time. So I think you're talking about the end in terms of library trustee fundraising. Is that right?
Yeah, I just,
Okay.
I'm trying to, I know everything has to add up to roughly 46.2.
Yeah. So
and-
the 13.8 target that the library trustees are responsible for, that doesn't include CPA.
Okay.
So and that's getting the ban earlier is the part that had CPA part of it, but it's just a coincidence that those numbers are the same.
Okay.
So the 13.8, if you go to one of the recent MOUs, I think it was MOU number 2, that outlines the each source. So 13.8 from the library, the 15.5 or so from MBLC, $1 million from CPA, and then the balance from the town. So the 13.8 is just the library share that they have to contribute. And
Okay, so you've taken
Yeah.
everything else out. So if I take 13.8 minus the 4.9 they've done so far,
yeah,
that's what they
get to
need,
8.9 million
Eight-
left to go.
8.9, which last I looked at is about equal to the total endowment. I know we're a
Right.
few years out.
Yeah, and again,
but-
this doesn't include commitments or other sources that they have earmarked or obligated. This is purely what's been turned over at this point.
And that's not, the HUD money is already
Yes, that's part of
on
it.
another account book. Okay,
Yep.
that's what I was looking for. Thank you. So
Sam?
we're,
I think Sam has another question.
so I'll flip it the other way. So we're carrying until 2028. We potentially are carrying 8.9, but we may get, the pledges may come due and they may be we don't know what will happen to that 8.9 between March 2026 and somewhere in the spring of 2028, 2 years from now, correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Sam.
Thank you, Kathy. I think you alluded to this on a previous meeting, Sean, and even today, but of the current library portion of the borrowing at 13.8, if I understood correctly, you said there was a 286,000 amount per year, but that we also receive interest income on that while we're holding it, pending the use of it towards project costs. So on the front end, we get a little bit of cash, for lack of a better term, from that 13.8. And then down the road, we pay it out. Did I say that correctly, or am I incorrect?
Yeah, so when we, and this is one contributing factor to why investment income has been so high the last year or two, is that we've had a lot of construction loans, and sometimes the construction loans are, as bills are being paid, but both of these projects have had some delays in the middle where some funds were being held while those delays happened, right? So yes, these funds, when we have them, they're in our lowest interest rate account. Our money market accounts are in the 3% range right now for interest. Now it might not be there 2 months from now. I think we're in a weird time, so a lot of our thinking is around risk avoidance and, just being prudent in that way. But yeah, the returns rate, the investment rates right now are pretty good.
I think that's an important piece of information for those who have interest in the project financing. Thank you.
So, I think what Sean has just given us will mean I will send you all what you saw about the questions as we saw them when I had them, but we can amend some of the library questions because we have answers to them. What we don't have answers to is how the state of the endowment fund, the draw on it that they need, and if they have to come out for this amount of money. So just for those who are following the project, one idea the trustees had was getting a bank loan against the endowment, and the bank loan would be turned over to the town, but it has the same impact of the endowment then has a debt that it's owing. So I will reword some of what you saw because we just got answers to what's been paid so far and what we're carrying, so that we don't duplicate it. And as I understood you, Sean, on Monday with the building committee itself, the library started out with a little under 3 million in contingency, but had to draw on some of it for the slate roof and some of the other pieces. So you'll be reporting on what all of that looks like on Monday.
Yeah, so we'll give an update on the project budget, how much has been spent from the different sources that we have. And I know the contingency in particular is an important number, so we'll give an update on what is what's available at that point.
And do they get, I haven't tuned into any of the discussions, on this. So on the school building project, we get this monthly accounting that's very colorful, and it shows the amount that's not committed to anything. And
Yeah.
to the extent we draw down, that's the contingency, to the extent we draw down on it, that little green bar gets smaller. But mostly, we haven't had to draw very much on it because there haven't been change orders. There've been a few. But so does the library get that same kind of accounting?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it since I've been back on the building committee. I know Bob gets it and looks and reviews it.
Okay.
Bob Parent, who is acting, as special projects coordinator and is sort
That's
of our liaison. So Bob reviews it, and that's really what we're doing, is making sure that our numbers line up with what the OPM has for numbers and make sure they all jive properly, and particularly that contingency line. And the difference between our numbers, which is why I have to work with Bob, is when the OPM puts that together, they include contracts, but they also include anticipated costs. And our accounting system, there's no anticipated costs. We either have contracts or we don't, right? Or invoices paid or not. And so that's where there's a little bit of a delta that Bob and I have had to just make sure we're on the same page, which we are, to make sure that what they have in contracts lines up with what we have in contracts, and then we have to factor in the anticipated costs as well, to make sure that we're on track.
Lynn.
I have to leave.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's 2:55. So I want to thank Sean for that quick run through. And I think we have the workings of an agenda for March 17th, and I'll feed that back to people. So Lynn has left us. So if there aren't any other questions, then I will make a motion to adjourn. And thank you everyone for the attention to a lot of quick questions rolling through you, but you'll get my list tonight, and then you'll get the memos reconstituted the way Anna suggested, with a tone to them on and when they're due, and allowing for plenty of room to explain things rather than just use the numbers to tell a story. And since I came to the meeting with all of those, if anyone has anything to add, they should just send them to me and I'll incorporate them in, particularly on the town side, once you see the town list, so that when we come back together on the 17th. So I make a motion to adjourn at 2:57 p.m.
Early. I'll
Is,
second it.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Sam,
Aye.
Kathy's a yes, Tom,
Aye, aye.
Anna,
Aye.
we are adjourned. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Sean, for sticking with us.
Kathy,
Thank you.
I forgot an announcement that I'll make. It's not relevant to this meeting, but GOL is interviewing candidates for finance on March 10th for the resident member roles. So if folks want to tune in for that, it'll be March 10th. Our meetings are at 6:30, and I apologize. I'll email that to the committee. It's logistical in nature, so I think I can email it out to everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everyone, and
Bye.
thank you.